That morning, no one expected a single act of defiance to change military history. What began as routine training became a moment every soldier on base would remember, and one that would test the difference between following orders and doing what's right. The desert sun hung low over the Nevada training grounds, casting long shadows across the packed sand. Lieutenant Elena Vasquez stood at attention in the formation, her boots planted firmly in the grit, the weight of her uniform pressing against her shoulders like an old friend. The air carried the sharp tang of dust and gun oil, mingling with the faint, earthy scent of her K9 partner Rex, who sat motionless at her heel. Rex was a Belgian Malinois, his black and tan coat sleek under the harness, ears perked forward as if listening to the wind itself. Their bond had been forged over years of drills and deployments, silent cues, shared breaths in the dead of night, a trust that words could never capture. "Platoon, attention!" The command barked from Captain Harlan Reed, his voice cutting through the morning haze like a blade. The line of SEAL candidates snapped to, heels together, chins up, eyes fixed on the horizon. Eleanor felt the familiar rhythm of it all, the creak of leather belts, the subtle shift of rifles on shoulders, the low hum of a distant Black Hawk warming its engines. This was SEAL Team 7's standard pre-dawn PT, physical training laced with tactical simulations to keep the edge sharp for the real ops. Elena had earned her trident 2 years prior, one of the few women to break through the pipeline's unforgiving gauntlet. At 34, she moved with the quiet precision of someone who knew the cost of hesitation. Rex's nose twitched, catching a scent on the breeze, but he held his position. Eleanor placed a gloved hand lightly on his flank, a reassurance more for her than him. In the SEALs, handlers like her were the unseen thread binding human instinct to canine acuity. Rex wasn't just a dog, he was her shadow, trained to detect explosives, track insurgents, and sense threats before they materialized. Their partnership had saved lives in Afghanistan, quietly, without fanfare. Today, though, was routine, a mock infiltration exercise through mock urban terrain, testing response times and unit cohesion. The captain paced the front, his boots kicking up small clouds of sand. "Vasquez, your lead on the breach team. Rex clears the entry. Everyone else maintain overwatch. We move in 5. Nods rippled through the platoon, a murmur of hooyah echoing softly. Eleanor acknowledged with a sharp salute, her pulse steady. She clipped Rex's lead to her vest, feeling the familiar tension in the line between them. As they advanced toward the mock compound, a cluster of shipping containers rigged with simulated IEDs, the wind picked up, whipping sand against their goggles. The exercise unfolded with mechanical efficiency. Elena signaled Rex forward. He low-crawled ahead, nose to the ground, tail low and alert. The platoon fanned out behind, weapons at the ready, radios crackling with position checks. "Alpha team in position," came the voice of Petty Officer Ramirez over the comms, his tone clipped and professional. Elena's focus narrowed to Rex's movements, the subtle flick of his ears, the pause at a suspicious crate. "Clear," she reported, her voice calm through the static. They breached the first door, flashbangs popping in controlled bursts, the acrid smoke stinging her eyes. But as they cleared the second structure, something shifted. A sharp whistle cut the air, not from the instructors, but from the observation platform. General Marcus Hale, a grizzled veteran overseeing the base's joint exercises, leaned over the railing, his face etched with impatience. He was here for the quarterly review, a formality to ensure inter-service protocols held up. Elena caught his eye briefly. His stare was appraising, not unkind, but carrying the weight of command that demanded perfection. "Freeze the sim!" Hale's voice boomed, amplified by the platform's speakers. The platoon halted mid-advance, breaths held. Elena knelt beside Rex, who whined softly, sensing the disruption. Hale descended the stairs, his polished shoes incongruous against the sand, flanked by two aides. "Vasquez," he addressed her directly, ignoring the captain. "Your dog's performance is adequate, but we're integrating Air Force assets today. That includes their K-9 unit. Yours stays leashed." Elena rose slowly, her hand steady on Rex's head. "Sir, Rex is certified for this terrain. He's cleared more compounds than—" "Stow it, Lieutenant," Hale interrupted, his tone even but firm. "Protocol. The Air Force handler takes point. Your animal's off the field." The words landed like a slap, though delivered without heat. Around them, the platoon shifted uneasily, eyes darting between ranks. Captain Reed stepped forward, but Hale waved him off. "This isn't a debate. It's chain of command." Elena felt the heat rise in her chest, not anger, but the quiet burn of injustice. Rex had been her constant through sandstorms and ambushes, sidelining him now for what? Inter-service posturing? She glanced at the Air Force handler, a young sergeant with a German shepherd straining at its lead, and saw the confusion mirrored there. But orders were orders. "Understood. General," she replied, her voice level though her fingers tightened on the leash. As the exercise resumed with the new lead, Elena fell back to overwatch, Rex panting softly at her side. The wind carried the distant thump of helicopter rotors, a Chinook prepping for the next phase. She watched Rex's ears swivel, attuned to sounds the others missed. The general's decision rippled through the unit like a fault line, whispers of favoritism, questions of protocol. By midday, as the sun beat down on the debrief tent, the tension lingered. Hale addressed the group, his presence commanding the canvas-flapped space. "Efficiency over sentiment," he stated flatly. "We don't complicate ops with divided loyalties." Elena sat in the back row. Rex curled under the folding chair, his warmth grounding her. But as the general fielded questions, a report crackled over the base radio, an urgent call from a remote outpost. A supply convoy had been hit, possible insurgents with reports of hidden explosives. The room tensed, Hale's brow furrowed. "That's not our sector," he said, dismissing it. "Forward to the locals, it's not our problem." The words echoed in Elena's mind as the meeting broke. Duty pulled at her. The convoy was near their training zone, and Rex could make the difference. But the general's order was clear: stand down. As dusk fell, the base lights flickered on, casting long shadows over the helipads. Elena lingered by the Chinook, the rotor wash tugging at her fatigues. Rex pressed against her leg, whining low. The night helicopter was fueling up, a solo recon if needed. No one watched as she weighed the silence of obedience against the pull of what she knew was right. The rotor blades of the Chinook thrummed in the cooling desert air, a steady pulse that matched the quickening beat in Elena's chest. She stood at the edge of the helipad, the floodlights casting stark pools of yellow across the tarmac, illuminating the faint oil stains and the coiled fuel hoses snaking like veins. Rex sat alert beside her, his dark eyes reflecting the glow, nostrils flaring as he caught the metallic tang of aviation fuel mixed with the night's rising chill. The base was settling into its evening rhythm, distant voices calling out shift changes, the clank of mess hall trays, the soft whir of generators powering the perimeter lights. But Elena's world had narrowed to this moment, the general's dismissal echoing in her ears. "It's not our problem." She adjusted the strap of her rucksack, the weight of her gear, a familiar anchor, medkit, night vision goggles, and Rex's specialized harness with its embedded sensors. Captain Reed had already retired to his quarters after the debrief, his parting words a quiet caution. "Don't push it, Vasquez. Hale's got pull with the brass." The platoon had dispersed, murmurs trailing like smoke. Speculation about the convoy hit, resentment over the Air Force swap during training. Elena had nodded, her face a mask of compliance, but inside, the fault lines widened. The outpost radio report had been sparse. A marine supply run, ambushed 30 clicks out, vehicles disabled, possible booby traps in the wreckage. No casualties confirmed, but the urgency in the dispatcher's voice had carried the undercurrent of fear. Rex nudged her knee with his muzzle, a low rumble in his throat, not aggression, but insistence. He sensed it, the same way he had in the Hindu Kush, when a buried IED's chemical trace had pulled him toward danger before the squad even smelled the cordite. Elena knelt, running her fingers along his jawline, feeling the steady warmth of his breath. "Easy, boy," she murmured, her voice barely above the helicopter's idle hum. Their bond was wordless, built on cues honed in the pipeline, a tilt of her head for alert, the press of his paw for confirmation. He'd saved her life once, dragging her from a collapsing tunnel under fire. Now he seemed to sense the fracture in her resolve. The Chinook's crew chief, a wiry, petty officer named Torres, approached from the shadows, clipboard in hand. "Ma'am, birds hot in 10. You sure about solo recon? Regulations say minimum 2 for night ops." His tone was respectful, but his eyes flicked to Rex, then back to her. Elena rose, meeting his gaze squarely. "Affirmative. Quick in and out. Rex and I can clear the site faster without the full team footprint." Torres hesitated, glancing toward the command tent where lights still burned. General Hale's silhouette moved behind the canvas, phone pressed to his ear. "General's orders were stand down, Lieutenant. This sector's army turf." Elena felt the words like gravel underfoot. Stand down. It was protocol, etched into every briefing. Inter-service boundaries preserved to avoid overlap, egos or worse, escalation. But the convoy was carrying medical evac supplies, bound for a forward aid station that SEAL Team 7 had supported last rotation. Lives hung in that balance, and Rex's nose could detect plastique or fertilizer bombs where human eyes failed in the dark. She thought of the handler from the Air Force unit, sidelined just like her dog earlier that day. Coincidence? Or the general's preference for his own playbook? "Torres," she said evenly, "log it as independent assessment. If it's clean, we pull back. If not..." She let the implication hang, her hand resting on Rex's collar. The crew chief nodded once, crisp and professional, then turned to signal the pilot. Elena clipped Rex's lead short, guiding him toward the ramp as it lowered with a hydraulic whine. The interior smelled of canvas and jet exhaust, red nightlights casting elongated shadows across the webbed seats. She secured Rex in the jump seat, his body language calm but coiled, paws planted wide. As the ramp lifted, sealing them in, the Chinook's engines spooled up, vibrating through the deck. Elena strapped in, pulling her helmet's mic close. "Tower, this is Echo 1 requesting clearance. Solo flight to grid, 4729. Static crackled, then the response. "Echo 1 cleared for takeoff, winds light out of the west. Maintain VFR. No mention of the general, no hold. Perhaps Hale hadn't been looped in yet, or perhaps Torres had filed it under routine patrol." Elena leaned back as the helicopter lifted, the base shrinking below. A grid of lit barracks and runways, the training grounds now swallowed by night. Rex shifted, pressing against her leg, his whine muffled by the roar. The flight was 30 minutes over barren scrub, the Nevada moonscape unfolding like a black and white tactical map. Elena reviewed the cords on her wrist-mounted GPS, the green glow illuminating her gloved hands. Her mind replayed the day's slights, Hale's interruption during the sim, the leashing of Rex, the curt dismissal of the convoy distress. Was it oversight or something deeper, a test of loyalty to the chain? She'd risen through the ranks by questioning little, executing much. But conscience wasn't a switch. It was the quiet voice that had kept her pushing through Bud S when doubt clawed at her lungs. "2 mics out," the pilot announced over the intercom, his voice steady. Elena unstrapped, checking her suppressed sidearm and Rex's vest, sensors active, signaling green. The Chinook banked, descending toward the ambush site. Twisted Humvees like broken toys on the dirt track, flares sputtering faintly from the lead vehicle. No movement, but shadows played tricks in the low light. As the helo hovered for drop, Elena led Rex down the ramp, the downdraft kicking up dust devils. "Stay frosty," she whispered to him, though it was as much for herself. They hit the ground running, boots sinking into soft sand, Rex pulling taut on the lead. The air was thick with the acrid bite of burned rubber and spilled diesel, undercut by something sharper, chemical, volatile. Rex's ears pinned back, body low as he veered toward the wrecked convoy's undercarriage. Elena followed, her NVGs flipping down, world turning ethereal green. "Easy," she breathed, scanning for hostiles. Her faint groan echoed from the cab, survivors, pinned but alive. Rex froze at a mangled tire well, paw scraping the dirt. Elena's heart tightened. She knew that signal. Explosives, fresh laid. Calling it in would mean admitting the breach, facing Hale's wrath. But leaving it, that was the real violation. She keyed her radio, voice low. "Command, this is Vasquez. Confirmed IEDs at convoy site. Request EOD support." Static, then Reed's voice. "Vasquez, you're off-grid. General's en route. Stand by." The words chilled her more than the night wind. En route? Hale had dismissed it hours ago. As Rex nosed closer, whining urgently, Elena realized the test had just begun. Not just for her, but for the invisible lines of command that bound them all. The distant thump of another helo approached. Lights piercing the dark. Time was eroding, and with it, the fragile order of the day. The rotor wash from the approaching helicopter battered the wreckage like an incoming storm, scattering loose debris across the moonlit sand. Elena crouched low behind the mangled frame of a Humvee, her gloved hand firm on Rex's collar, his body rigid with focus. The dog's nose hovered inches from the ground, tracing the faint chemical signature embedded in the soil. Plastic explosives, likely C4, laced with diesel, a crude but effective insurgent signature. The air hung heavy with the stench of scorched metal and leaking hydraulic fluid, punctuated by the labored breathing of the pinned driver inside the cab, his groans faint but insistent. Elena's NVGs painted the scene in ghostly greens. Twisted axles, shattered windshields glinting like ice, and the subtle mound where Rex had alerted, no larger than a boot print. She kept her voice to a whisper on the radio, the static a fragile shield. "Command Echo 1. 2 IEDs confirmed under lead vehicle. Non-standard placement. Looks like a daisy chain. Drivers alive, possible others in the trailer." Her pulse thrummed steady. Trained discipline overriding the knot of defiance in her gut. This was off-book, a solo insertion against explicit stand-down orders, but the general's words, "It's not our problem," clashed with the oath she'd sworn, to protect those under fire, rank be damned when lives teetered. Rex shifted, his paw tapping insistently, eyes locked on the mound. Elena scanned the perimeter, the desert stretching endless and indifferent, dotted with creosote bushes that whispered in the wind. No thermal signatures on her goggles, no hostiles, just the cooling hulks of vehicles and the distant glow of the outpost's perimeter lights. The convoy had been Army routine resupply, but the ambush reeked of opportunism, testing borders in this joint training sector. She edged closer, knife in hand to probe the soil gently, confirming the wire traces without disturbing them. "Torres, get EOD spun up," she added to the comms. "We need a bird for evac now." The response came sharp, Captain Reed's voice laced with urgency. "Vasquez, hold position. General Hale's inbound on the Black Hawk, ETA 3 mics. You weren't cleared for this." Elena's jaw tightened under her helmet. Inbound? Hale, who had dismissed the initial reporter's inter-service noise, now mobilizing his own ride. The implications twisted like the wires beneath her feet. oversight or a scramble to contain the breach before it smeared his command. She unkeyed the mic, exhaling slowly, the cool night air fogging her exhalation briefly. Rex pressed against her side, his flank warm and reassuring, a silent anchor in the unraveling protocol. The Black Hawk's lights pierced the horizon first, a predatory silhouette slicing through the dark, its blades chopping the air with authoritative thuds. Eleanor signaled Rex to heel, retreating to a defensible position amid the scrub, her sidearm drawn low. The helo touched down 50 meters out, kicking up a blinding vortex of sand that stung her exposed skin. As the ramp dropped, General Hale emerged first, his frame silhouetted against the cabin's red glow, followed by 2 MPs and a cluster of aides clutching tablets. Captain Reed brought up the rear, his face a mask of controlled tension under the helmet light. Hale's boots hit the ground with purpose, his uniform pristine despite the hour, eyes scanning the sight like a tactician dissecting a board. "Vasquez!" Hale's command cut through the dying rotors, his voice amplified by authority rather than volume. He strode forward, the MPs fanning out to secure the perimeter, their flashlights sweeping in disciplined arcs. Elena rose from her crouch, Rex at her side, his hackles subtly raised but obedient. She snapped a salute, crisp and unwavering, though her mind raced through the charges stacking against her. Unauthorized op, breach of chain, potential endangerment of assets. "General," she replied evenly, "sight secured." Rex detected the devices, driver stable but trapped. Hale's gaze flicked to Rex, then back to her, the lines around his eyes deepening in the floodlight's harsh glare. "I gave a direct order to stand down. This sector's not ours." His tone was measured, the kind honed in war rooms, but undercut by a flicker of something, irritation, perhaps calculation. Reed stepped up beside him, tablet extended with the radio logs. "Sir, the initial dispatch came through during debrief. Vasquez acted on instinct." "Instinct doesn't override protocol, Captain," Hale interrupted, his eyes never leaving Elena. The aides murmured into their radios, coordinating with the outpost, while the MPs cordoned off the IED site with chem lights, their movements precise, boots grinding sand into patterns. Elena felt the weight of their stares, the platoon invisible, but the reckoning immediate. Word would spread by dawn, whispers in the chow line, entries in after-action reports. This wasn't just her defiance. It exposed the cracks in Hale's dismissal, the human cost of rigid boundaries. Rex whined low, sensing the standoff, his nose twitching toward the general's approach. Elena placed a hand on his head, a subtle barrier. "Sir, the convoy's supplies were for our aid station rotation. If we'd waited, those devices could have—" "Enough!" Hale cut in, waving a hand. The wind tugged at his collar insignia, the silver eagle glinting coldly. He turned to Reed. "Get the driver extracted. EOD takes lead from here." Then to Elena, quieter but no less firm. "You and your dog report to my tent at 600. This isn't over." He pivoted back to the helo, aides trailing. The MPs lingering to escort her. As the Black Hawk lifted off, its downdraft flattening the brush, Elena watched it climb, the site's isolation pressing in. Reed clapped her shoulder briefly, a gesture of solidarity masked as routine. "You bought them time, Lieutenant, but Hale's not one for loose ends." She nodded, clipping Rex's lead as they waited for the evac bird. The driver's groans had quieted. Medics now swarming from the outpost response team, their voices a low hum of procedure. Dawn crept at the edges of the sky, painting the horizon in muted grays. Elena's actions had rippled outward, witnesses in the MPs, logs in the system, the first threads of a public thread pulling at the chain of command. Rex leaned into her leg, his loyalty, a quiet vow amid the gathering storm. The cost of integrity was unfolding, one disciplined step at a time. "Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far stories of courage and integrity can reach." The first light of dawn filtered through the command tent's canvas flaps, turning the air inside a hazy gold. Elena sat at the folding table, her posture ramrod straight, the faint grit of desert sand still embedded in her fatigues from the night's extraction. Rex lay at her feet, his flanks rising and falling in steady rhythm, one ear cocked toward the door as if anticipating the footsteps that would soon arrive. The tent smelled of stale coffee and printer ink, the hum of a field generator underscoring the quiet tension. Outside, the bass stirred. The distant bark of reveille, the scrape of boots on gravel paths, the low murmur of early shift personnel filing toward the motor pool. Elena's hands rested flat on the table, gloved fingers tracing the edge of her mission log, a habit to steady the mind when questions loomed larger than answers. General Hale entered without preamble, the flap snapping shut behind him like a punctuation mark. He was flanked by Captain Reed and a JAG officer, Lieutenant Commander Ellis, whose briefcase clicked open with the precision of a chambered round. Hale's face was shadowed by fatigue, the lines etched deeper from the all-night coordination with Army Command. The convoy driver had been medevaced successfully, the IEDs neutralized by EOD without further incident, but the reports had already cascaded up the chain. Logs time-stamped, witness statements from the MPs, even grainy drone footage of the Chinook's unauthorized departure. "Vasquez," Hale began, settling into the chair opposite her, his voice level but carrying the weight of an impending tribunal. "Walk me through it, from the debrief dismissal to your takeoff." Elena met his gaze directly, her voice measured, each word chosen like a round in a magazine. "Sir, the radio report came in at 20:45 hours during the SIM wrap-up. Convoy hit, potential explosives, no immediate response from Sector Command. Rex's capabilities were optimal for rapid detection. I assess the risk as low for a solo recon. Insert, clear, extract." She paused, feeling Rex's subtle shift beneath the table, his nose brushing her boot in quiet support. The general's eyes narrowed slightly, not in accusation, but in the cold calculus of command review. Reed stood to the side, arms crossed, his expression neutral, but his eyes conveying a flicker of advocacy. The platoon had already begun to fracture along lines of loyalty. Ellis leaned forward, adjusting his glasses, the pen in his hand, scratching notes on a legal pad. "Lieutenant, Protocol 7 to 12B requires inter-service notification and approval for cross-sector ops. You bypassed that. The general's stand-down was explicit." The words hung in the air, formal and unyielding, the kind that could end careers in a single after-action review. Eleanor nodded once, acknowledging the breach without evasion. "Understood, sir, but the aid station those supplies were for, it's tied to our last deployment. Delay could have meant casualties we could have prevented." Her tone remained even, the restraint a shield against the undercurrent of moral friction. Outside, a Black Hawk taxied nearby, its rotors whipping up a brief gust that rattled the tent stakes. Hale steepled his fingers, the silver rings on his hands catching the light. "Your actions saved a life tonight. The driver's testimony credits your dog with spotting the chain before it cooked off." A concession, small but seismic in the rigid hierarchy. Yet his next words tempered it. "But you undermined the chain. Boundaries exist for a reason. Coordination prevents friendly fire, duplication, escalation. This isn't about one dog or one officer. It's the system." Elena felt the ripple of that truth, the quiet vulnerability of her choice laid bare. Rex had sensed the explosives, yes, but she'd chosen to act, betting her trident on conscience over command. The JAG officer flipped a page, his voice probing. "Any prior incidents with inter-service protocols, Lieutenant Vasquez?" The question skirted close to her history, the pipeline struggles, the sidelong glances in mixed units, the quiet fights to prove a woman's place in the teams. "Negative, sir," she replied, her chin lifting fractionally. "Clean record. This was judgment call based on asset utility." Reed interjected softly, "General, the Air Force K-9 swap during training highlighted integration issues. Vasquez's team has the best detection metrics in the sector." Hale's gaze shifted to him, a silent rebuke, but the seed was planted. Witnesses beyond the tent walls, the platoon debriefing in the ready room, where Ramirez and the others would vouch for her instincts. As the questioning dragged into the morning, the tent grew warmer, the coffee cooling untouched in chipped mugs. Elena's mind wandered to the broader echoes, how one defiance could expose the frayed edges of institutional trust. Hale dismissed Ellis with a nod, the JAG officer gathering his papers with a rustle. "We'll reconvene with full board at 1400, Hale stated, rising. "Until then, you're confined to quarters. No contact with the unit." His eyes lingered on Rex, a momentary softening. The general was a veteran of K-9 ops in his early days, though he'd never admit sentiment. The dogs reassigned to base patrol pending review. Elena's hand tightened involuntarily under the table, but she kept her face impassive. "Sir, Rex and I are a certified unit. Separation impacts nothing if you're sidelined." Hale cut in, his tone brooking no argument. He exited, Reed following with a brief, encouraging glance. The flap fell shut, leaving Eleanor alone with the dog, the air thick with unresolved tension. She knelt, burying her fingers in Rex's fur, feeling the steady thrum of his heartbeat. "We're in it now, boy," she whispered, the words a vow wrapped in discipline. Outside, the base pulsed with routine. A K-9 handler leading a patrol across the parade ground, radios crackling position checks, the sun climbing to bake the sand. But whispers had already begun. In the mess tent, among the MPs who'd seen her stand firm under Hale's glare. The reckoning was public now, the moral provocation laid bare for the ranks to judge. By midday, the story had permeated the barracks like sand through a screen door. Petty Officer Ramirez cornered her outside her quarters, his voice low amid the clang of lunch trays. "The whole platoon's buzzing, Lieutenant. Hale's pulling strings with JAG, but the driver's unit is sending thanks up the line. Your call might have just lit a fire under joint protocols." Elena nodded, keeping her response clipped. "Focus on your quals, Ramirez. This stays contained." But inside, the cost mounted. The isolation of quarters, the impending board, the fracture in the chain that her actions had both mended and widened. Rex paced the small space, whining at the door, his loyalty a mirror to her own unyielding resolve. As the afternoon heat peaked, Elena reviewed her log by the narrow window, the desert wind carrying faint echoes of training fire. The general's order to reassign Rex stung deepest, a severance of the bond that defined her edge. Yet in that quiet, a transformation stirred. Her defiance wasn't rebellion, but a catalyst, forcing the institution to confront its blind spots. The board at 1400 would test that, witnesses summoned, reputations on the line. For now, she waited, the weight of moral courage settling like dust on her shoulders, unshakable. The afternoon sun slanted through the slatted blinds of the base conference room, casting striped shadows across the polished oak table like bars of a cell. Elena stood at attention in the center, her dress blues crisp despite the confinement's toll. The faint scent of starch mingling with the room's underlying aroma of oiled wood and recirculated air. Rex was absent, reassigned to the kennels under Hale's directive, a hollow space at her side where his presence had always steadied her. The board convened with military precision, General Hale at the head, flanked by Captain Reed, Lieutenant Commander Ellis from JAG, and 2 senior officers from Joint Commands, their nameplates gleaming under the fluorescent hum. Outside, the parade ground echoed with the rhythmic cadence of a training march, boots thudding in unison, a reminder of the order Eleanor's actions had disrupted. "Be seated, Lieutenant," Hale intoned, his voice even, the gavel's tap unnecessary in the charged silence. Eleanor took her chair, posture unyielding, her hands folded on the table's edge. The room's walls lined with faded unit plaques and a single American flag drooping slightly in the still air seemed to close in as Ellis opened the proceedings. "This inquiry addresses Lieutenant Vasquez's unauthorized operation on the evening of 15th October. Charges under UCMJ Article 92, failure to obey order or regulation. Witnesses and evidence will be presented." He slid a stack of reports forward, radio transcripts, drone logs, the driver's sworn statement, their pages rustling like dry leaves. The first witness entered, Petty Officer Torres, the Chinook crew chief, his uniform rumpled from the overnight shift. He saluted sharply, then took the stand, eyes fixed on the board. "Ma'am, sirs," he began, voice steady over the faint whir of the AC unit. "Lieutenant Vasquez requested solo recon clearance at 21:30. I logged it as routine patrol per her assessment. No red flags on the manifest." Hale leaned forward, his fingers drumming a subtle rhythm on the table. "And the general's stand down? You were briefed in the ops tent." Torres met the gaze without flinching. "Affirmative, sir." But the dispatch indicated imminent threat. Explosives in play. Vasquez cited Rex's certification for that profile. Ellis noted the exchange, his pen scratching methodically. "Did you verify inter-service approval?" Torres paused, the room's tension thickening like desert humidity before a storm. "Negative, sir. Time was critical." A murmur rippled among the board, quickly quelled by Hale's raised hand. The crew chief was dismissed, his footsteps echoing down the hall, leaving the air heavier with implication. Elena remained silent, her mind tracing the threads. Torres's testimony wasn't exoneration, but it humanized the breach, shifting scrutiny from lone defiance to systemic gaps. Next came Sergeant Klein, the Army convoy driver, wheeled in on a gurney by a medic, his arm in a sling, face pale but resolute under the harsh lights. The scent of antiseptic trailed him, sharp against the room's staleness. "Lieutenant Vasquez's arrival saved my skin," he stated flatly when sworn in, his voice gravelly from pain meds. "Heard the rotors, then her dog sniffing out the chain under the axle. If they'd waited for our EOD, it might have been too late. Dawn light could have set it off." Reed nodded subtly from his seat, the driver's words a quiet indictment of the delay. Hale's expression remained impassive, but his eyes flicked to Elena, weighing the moral calculus. "Sergeant, you were Army sector. Standard protocol routes response to your chain." Klein's jaw set. "Protocol didn't account for the hit's proximity to SEAL grounds, sir. Her call bridged that." The board absorbed it, the senior officers exchanging glances that spoke of broader ripples, joint exercises strained by such oversights, reputations on the line for all services. Ellis pressed, "Any indication of sabotage or inter-service rivalry in the ambush?" Klein shook his head. "Negative. Just bad luck on a resupply run. But her K9. That dog's nose doesn't care about boundaries." As the medic wheeled him out, the door clicked shut, amplifying the room's isolation. Eleanor felt the shift. Witnesses weren't just defending her. They were exposing the fragility of the chain, where one order's rigidity could cost lives. Hale adjourned briefly, the board retreating to a side room, their murmurs muffled through the thin partition. Elena sat alone, the chair's vinyl creaking under her, the distant crackle of a radio drill seeping in like an unwelcome echo. Reed lingered, leaning close. "The driver's statement is gold. Ties back to our aid station ties. But Hale's pushing for reprimand to set example." She nodded, voice low. "Understood, Captain." Rex? Reed's face tightened. Still in kennels. Generals testing loyalty, yours and the unit's. The words landed with quiet force. The bond with Rex, now a pawn in the institutional game. When the board reconvened, Hale's tone carried a new edge, the afternoon light fading to amber through the blinds. Lieutenant Vasquez, your record is exemplary. Budes top percentile, deployments without blemish. But this action bypassed command, risking escalation. He paused, the weight of legacy in his stare. The IED chain was sophisticated. Your detection prevented a multi-vehicle loss. Army Command has commended the intervention, requesting joint K9 integration protocols. Ellis interjected, recommendation, formal reprimand with mandatory cross-training. No loss of rank, but reassignment review for the Handler K9 unit. Elena absorbed it, the restraint a veneer over the surge of vindication mixed with cost. Sir, if I may, Rex and I operate as one. Separation undermines efficacy. Hale's eyes softened fractionally, a veteran recognizing the unspoken truth of K9 partnerships. Noted, the board will deliberate further, dismissed until 1800. As she rose to salute, the room's air stirred with the opening door, carrying the faint, familiar scent of wet fur from a passing patrol dog outside. Rex's reassignment loomed, but the testimonies had elevated her choice from infraction to catalyst, whispers already filtering to the ranks, MPs recounting the night's standoff, the platoon coalescing in quiet support. Outside, the base cooled under a deepening sky, the parade ground emptying as shifts changed, radios fading to evening static. Elena walked the gravel path to her quarters, the crunch underfoot a rhythmic counterpoint to her thoughts. The tribunal wasn't resolution, but reckoning, public now, with commendations crossing service lines, forcing Hale to confront the moral blind spots in his orders. In the kennels, she knew Rex waited, ears perked for her step, their loyalty the unyielding core amid the system's slow reform. The cost pressed on, but integrity's echo grew, one disciplined breath at a time. The evening shadows stretched long across the base as Elena approached the kennels, the gravel path crunching under her polished boots like a subdued drumbeat. The air had cooled, carrying the faint, metallic tang of the day's lingering heat rising from the tarmac, mingled with the earthy musk of dogs and straw from the open-air runs. Her quarters confinement had given way to this brief reprieve, permission from Reed to check on Rex before the board's final session at 1800. The tribunal's interim ruling hung over her like a half-lowered barrier. Reprimand pending, reassignment looming, but the commendations from Army Command injecting a fragile momentum into the proceedings. Whispers had followed her from the conference room, salutes held a beat longer from passing MPs, a nod from a K9 tech in the motor pool, signs that her stand had pierced the veil of routine, turning private defiance into a shared undercurrent. The kennel master, a grizzled chief petty officer named Harlan, met her at the gate, his keys jingling softly against the chain-link fence. He's been quiet, Lieutenant. Ate his chow, ran the perimeter twice. Senses you're coming. Harlan's voice was gruff but laced with respect, his eyes flicking to the horizon, where the sun dipped behind the jagged mountains. Elena nodded, stepping through, the gate's latch clicking shut with finality. The runs stretched in orderly rows, each enclosure a square of wire and concrete, the dogs' silhouettes alert under the sodium lamps flickering to life. Rex was in the end unit, his form rising as she approached, tail wagging in restrained arcs, a low whine escaping as he pressed his muzzle to the mesh. She knelt, gloved hand extending through the wire, feeling the rough warmth of his coat and the insistent nudge of his nose. "Hey, partner," she murmured, her voice a thread of normalcy in the gathering dusk. No dramatic reunion, just the quiet reaffirmation of their bond, forged in silence and shared vigilance. Rex's eyes locked on hers, dark and knowing, as if he understood the stakes. The board's deliberation could sever them, reassigning him to base security while she faced desk duty or worse. Harlan lingered at a distance, busying himself with a clipboard, giving her space. "General's brief mentioned integration trials," he said over his shoulder. "Your ops got brass talking joint K9 protocols. Might not be all bad." Elena rose slowly, her fingers lingering on the fence. Integration. The word echoed the day's fractures, the Air Force swap during training, Hale's sidelining of Rex, the convoy's peril born of siloed commands. Her actions had forced the conversation, but at what price? The kennel's ambient sounds wrapped around her, the soft pant of other dogs settling for the night, the distant hum of a generator, the occasional bark punctuating the wind. She clipped a lead through the gate, temporary leash time per regs, and led Rex into the exercise yard, a fenced paddock of packed dirt under floodlights. They walked in tandem, his pace matching hers without cue, the leash slack between them. As they circled the perimeter, Elena's thoughts turned to the broader ripples. Reed had slipped her a printout before the afternoon adjournment, a memo from Joint Command, citing the convoy incident as a teachable moment for cross-sector response. The driver's testimony had been amplified in after-action briefs shared across units, turning her breach into a case study. No heroics, just procedural fact, a SEAL handler's instincts bridging gaps that orders had widened. Rex paused at a seam in the fence, nose twitching at an old scent, then resumed, his loyalty a model of unquestioned duty. Elena envied that clarity. Humans tangled in hierarchies where conscience clashed with protocol. The yard's gate creaked as Ramirez approached, hands in pockets, his off-duty fatigues a rare sight. "Captain sent me. Board's reconvening soon. Word is, Hale's softening on the reassignment." His tone was clipped, mission-focused. But his eyes held the platoon's quiet solidarity. They debriefed without her, hashing out the night's events in the ready room, voices low over lukewarm coffee. "The MPs from the site? They're vouching. Said you held formation under fire. Hale's glare counts as that." Elena acknowledged with a nod, keeping Rex between them. The dog's ears perked at the intruder's voice. "Appreciate the heads up. Petty officer, but this isn't about votes. It's the chain." Ramirez shifted, boots scuffing the dirt. "Chain's only as strong as the links, ma'am. Your link held when it mattered." He saluted loosely and retreated, leaving the yard to its hush. Elena unclipped Rex, letting him roam free within the bounds, his form a shadow darting to test the corners. The exercise grounded her, the simple act of trust amid constraint. As 1800 neared, she releashed him, returning to the kennel with a final pat. "Hold tight, boy. We'll sort this." Harlan locked the gate, his parting words a murmur. "Dogs like him don't break easy. Neither do handlers." The conference room felt smaller upon her return, the air thicker with the residue of deliberation. Cooler now, laced with the faint ozone of the AC cycling harder against the evening chill. The board had expanded. 2 more officers from the K9 Integration Task Force, their tablets aglow with data projections on the wall, mapping response times and detection metrics from recent ops. Hale presided, his posture unchanged, but a new folder lay open before him. Commendation drafts, Elena noted from her seat. Ellis cleared his throat, the sound amplified in the quiet. "Lieutenant Vasquez, the board has reviewed all testimony and evidence. Your actions, while in violation of direct orders, demonstrated exemplary judgment under uncertainty." Hale leaned forward, the lamplight catching the silver in his hair. "The convoy incident exposed deficiencies in inter-service protocols. Army Command concurs. A unified K9 response framework is warranted. Your intervention and your partners will inform the pilot program." The words landed with measured impact. No fanfare, just the procedural pivot toward reform. Reed's eyes met hers briefly, a flicker of relief. The senior officers nodded, one adding, "We'll mandate cross-training rotations starting next quarter. Handlers like you set the standard." Elena absorbed it, her response steady. "Understood, sirs. Rex and I stand ready." The general's gaze held hers, a veteran assessing a peer rather than a subordinate. "Reprimand stands, written, no career mark. But the reassignment is lifted. Your lead on the integration trials." He closed the folder with a snap, the sound echoing like a cleared chamber. "Dismissed," Elena saluted, the room's tension easing as the board rose, handshakes exchanged in low tones. Outside, the base lights fully ignited, casting the parade ground in a grid of illumination, patrols moving with renewed purpose. As she walked to retrieve Rex, the night's transformation settled. Her defiance had not shattered the system, but reshaped it, quietly, through testimony and memos, sparking mentorship across ranks. The platoon would train differently now, boundaries blurred for efficacy, her integrity a subtle emblem. Rex greeted her at the kennel gate, tail steady, their bond unbroken. In the wind-swept dark, Elena felt the legacy take root, one act of moral courage, rippling through the chain like a well-placed signal. If this story already has your respect, hit the like button. It helps the story of Elena Vasquez reach those who still believe in honor. The first rays of the Nevada sun crested the horizon, painting the training grounds in muted oranges and golds, as Elena Vasquez led Rex through the early morning formation. Her boots sank into the cool sand, the familiar grit shifting underfoot, while the air carried the crisp bite of dew on creosote bushes and the distant tang of aviation fuel from the helipads. Rex moved at her heel with effortless precision, his harness snug against his flanks, ears forward as if attuned to the subtle commands in her posture alone. The platoon had assembled in standard PT array, SEAL Team 7 mixed with Air Force handlers for the inaugural Joint K-9 integration drill, ranks straight, rifles slung, eyes fixed ahead. No fanfare marked the occasion, just the low murmur of position checks over radios and the soft pant of dogs settling into formation. Captain Reed stood at the front, his voice cutting through the dawn hush like a well-oiled blade. "Platoon, this is Cross-Service Protocol 10. Vasquez takes point on detection SIM. Air Force elements mirror her cues. We integrate or we falter." Nods rippled down the line, a quiet hoo-yah echoing from the SEALs, met by crisp affirmatives from the visiting unit. Elena felt the weight of their gazes, not resentment, but the measured appraisal of peers, testing new ground. Weeks had passed since the tribunal, the reprimand a sealed entry in her file, its sting dulled by the broader shift. Hale's directive had elevated her to lead instructor for the pilot program, a role that transformed her solitary defiance into structured reform. No medals, no parades, just the procedural grind of rewriting manuals. One exercise at a time, she signaled Rex forward with a subtle hand tilt, the dog's response immediate. A low crawl toward the mock compound, nose skimming the earth for simulated traces. The Air Force sergeant, now partnered in the drill, released his German Shepherd in tandem, the two animals working parallel paths without overlap. Elena's voice stayed low on the comms. "Clear left flank. Rex alerts at 2 o'clock. Confirm with your asset." The sergeant's reply came steady. "Affirmative. Shepherd mirrors. Joint clear." The platoon advanced, boots synchronized, the wind whispering through the shipping containers rigged as urban terrain. This was the legacy of that night helicopter ride, boundaries redrawn not by edict but by proven efficacy, where K-9 units from disparate services shared cues and coverage, erasing the silos that had nearly cost the convoy driver his life. General Hale observed from the platform, his arms crossed, the lines of his face softened by the morning light reflecting off his insignia. He had endorsed the program personally, citing the incident in his quarterly report to Joint Command, a factual recounting that framed Elena's breach as a catalyst rather than a fault. No public acknowledgement of his initial stand-down, just the quiet pivot toward accountability, memos circulating through the ranks, emphasizing rapid response coordination. Elena caught his eye briefly as Rex paused at a buried SIM device, paw tapping the signal. Hale nodded once, crisp and professional, the gesture carrying the weight of institutional concession. Her actions had rippled upward, prompting reviews of inter-service protocols across sectors, with her logs now standard in officer training modules. As the exercise concluded, the group debriefed in the ops tent, canvas flaps stirring in the breeze, the scent of hot coffee mingling with the faint wet earth aroma of the dogs cooling down. Elena stood at the whiteboard, marker in hand, diagramming the dual alert sequence. Integration hinges on shared signals, she explained, her tone even, focused on procedure. Rex's metric hit 98% detection in low vis. Shepard complemented at 95%. Overlap reduces false negatives by 22%. The handlers leaned in, notebooks open, questions clipped and mission-oriented. Reed added from the side, "This model's rolling out base-wide next quarter. Vasquez's input ensures it sticks." No mention of the tribunal, just the forward momentum, where moral tension had forged practical evolution. Rex lay at her feet during the session, his head resting on her boot, a subtle press that grounded her amid the scrutiny. The bond remained their core, unsevered by the reassignment threat. Hale had relented fully after the board, recognizing the folly of splitting certified pairs. In quiet moments, like the post-drill walks along the perimeter fence, Elena reflected on the cost. Weeks of isolation, the platoon's sidelong glances turning to solidarity, the reprimand's shadow lingering in performance evals. Yet it had bought more than one life. It had embedded conscience into the chain, where orders now bent toward humanity without breaking structure. By midday, as the sun climbed to bake the sand, Elena and Rex patrolled the outer wire, the base's rhythm enveloping them, the thump of helicopter blades on test flights, the crackle of radio traffic coordinating joint patrols, the distant bark of other K-9s in training. Ramirez fell in step beside her, his stride matching the disciplined pace. "Program's already got buy-in from the Army outpost," he said, voice low. "Driver's unit requested your metrics for their resupplies." Elena nodded, her hand brushing Rex's flank. "Good. It's not about one op, it's the system adapting." He saluted as they parted, the exchange a thread in the widening web of reform. In the weeks that followed, Elena's role expanded, mentoring new handlers, co-authoring the Integration Field Guide, her name cited in briefings as the exemplar of balanced judgment. Hale summoned her once, in the dim light of his office, maps pinned to the walls like veins of command. "You tested the line, Vasquez," he said, his tone stripped of reproach, "pushed us to redraw it." She stood at attention, Rex at heel. "Duty demands it, sir." No more words, just the understanding that integrity's price was paid in silence, yielding legacies that outlasted reprimands. As dusk fell one evening, Elena clipped Rex's lead for their routine run, the desert wind carrying the hum of the base winding down. The stars emerged sharp against the velvet sky, a vast canopy over the transformed grounds. Her defiance had become the quiet symbol, whispers in the barracks evolving to formal doctrine, loyalty between human and canine mirroring the trust rebuilding across ranks. The institution learned not through upheaval, but through the steady discipline of one handler's choice, to act when orders faltered, forging moral strength into the unyielding framework of service. Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and justice within the ranks. Thank you for watching. The Case of the General said, "It's not our problem, but the woman SEAL took the night helicopter alone." See you in the next one.